Welcome to this training video, which will demonstrate the assembly of the SG-100 Model 2086 extension gun. We will begin by installing the various O-rings. We will start with the rear insulator. Install the O-ring as shown here. The middle insulator housing requires one O-ring on the inside as shown and two on the outside. Simply place the outside O-rings as shown and roll them into their respective grooves. The outer water divider has two O-rings. The first one is inserted fairly deeply as shown here. On the same end of the water divider, place the O-ring in the groove at the outside edge. And finally, a third ring can be rolled on from the opposite end all the way up to the lip near the previous rings. As we see here, we have already installed three O-rings, two on the front where the cathode attaches and one on the rear where it attaches to the torch. Now we can attach the cathode. Using a 3/8 inch wrench and a socket, be sure the cathode is snugly in place. Apply some O-ring lube to the outside surfaces at the ends of the water divider tube and lube the O-rings on the cathode holder. Apply O-ring lube to the inside at both ends of the rear insulator. If this side is too small for your finger, use the applicator or a Q-tip. Also, apply lube to the outside of the insulator. Once this is done, drop the insulator into the main housing as shown here. You might use the handle of the socket driver to pop it into place, making a positive seal. Before assembling the various parts, be sure all O-rings are lubricated. As you recall, this insulator has one O-ring inside and two on the outside. One additional bit of preparation is to mark the insulator. Using a permanent marker like a Sharpie, place a mark between two of the water holes. They are identical and evenly spaced, so it can be marked between any of the holes. We also put a mark above to make it easier to locate when we start adding other components. The next parts we need are the gas distributor and the 103 gas injector. Notice that the gas distributor is slotted on the outside. These slots are narrow on one end and a bit wider on the other, with a bit of a step or extension on that end. The end with the step and the wider slots goes into the insulator first. There is no orientation required here. Gently push it in until it stops. Next is the gas injector. Notice that the number faces outward when inserted, the opposite end going in first. Again, there is no orientation. It simply drops in and rests against the gas distributor. Now, the outer water divider. First, place a thin layer of O-ring lube inside because it will install over the two rings on the insulator. Note that the lube is needed specifically just inside and again just past the groove. This is where it will meet the O-rings. Another light application of O-ring lube is needed on the opposite end, the outer ring only. The O-ring in the end does not need to be lubricated because it is a compression ring. Do note, however, that there is an O-ring deeper inside this end which does need lubrication. Notice on the outer water divider that there are small openings. The mark we made earlier should line up with one of these openings, the idea being that the holes in the inner insulator should not line up with these holes, but rather between them. While it may not be clearly visible here, you should be able to see the mark through the openings. We will now prepare the outer tube by applying a layer of lubricant to the inside of the short threaded end. Insert the water divider assembly into this end as shown here and push it into place until it snaps in. Once in place, inspect the end to be sure the O-ring is not cut or pinched in any way. The piece being installed here is not part of the customer's package. This is an adapter used for in-house assembly, which we are about to see. Use a 5/32 inch Allen wrench to install it as shown. This will fit into the larger base, also available only for in-house assembly, to hold the housing steady for easier installation of components. Assuming all O-rings are lubricated, the assembly we built earlier can now be placed inside the housing with the cathode end facing upward. Use the 1/2 inch socket to tighten it. The next piece to install is the locking collar. Place it over the cathode assembly and secure it to the housing using 3 832 by 3/8 inch Allen screws. As with other parts, insert all screws just until they stop. Do not firmly tighten them just yet. Before installing the outer tube, we need the outer tube lock nut. Once in place, give it a few turns by hand. Now place some O-ring lube on this end of the outer tube. In addition, a few small drops of nickel-based anti-seize can be placed onto the threads. Slide the outer tube over the top until the threads engage. Next, we will install the anode. Apply some O-ring lube to the outer surface. Before the anode, drop the small water divider in with the 2 extended tabs facing upward. Then, place the anode in and secure them both with the lock collar. Now we can completely tighten the outer tube. Continue turning the outer tube until you feel resistance and it stops. You are in place. Take care not to over-tighten because the internal components are at risk of breakage if you do so. Now, by hand, screw the lock nut the rest of the way down and use the appropriate wrench to tighten it. Loosen the lock nut slightly, allowing the anode to be rotated so the powder exit is straight down. Here we see the air cap and the powder tube along with a single screw that holds both in place. We will need 2 more O-rings for the air cap, both going into the counter bores in the end piece. Now, using a 5/32 inch Allen wrench, we will put the tube clamp in place. Don't tighten it just yet, just get the screws started. While still not tightening the tube clamp, we are placing the opposite ends of the air cap and powder tubes into the clamp. Move the air cap into position against the anode. Then move the end of the powder tube into the cutaway in the air cap. Secure them with the 632 screw. Once all is positioned properly, tighten the tube clamp. Don't forget to remove the mounting bracket. The process is now complete.